Well, hey everybody. As you can see, there's been quite a few changes to the bus. It's actually another color now. My friend Brian, who lives in California, he was in, I think, part 1 and part 3 videos, and he's been helping me out with this bus restoration project. He came back for a couple weeks to hang out. We had a great time going to the city and going to a VW car show and various other things, but we also got a ton of work done while he was here, and I made this video of all the clips and all the things that we got done over the last couple weeks, so check it out. Well, even though it's about to rain, there's still a bit of sun, so I pushed it outside so I can give you a little bit of a view of what we did. You can see that we've got it sanded and primed. I only had a quarter primer. I had some of the SEM self-etching primer. I just had a quarter of it, so we shot it pretty thin in most areas just to seal up everything we did in case I don't have any more time to get to it. But you can see that we got everything pretty much primed. Now the body work is still not done. There's still lots of ripples and filler that needs to be put in, but I'm just going to probably tackle that in the spring after the winter. But you can see we've got pretty much everything primed up. But the biggest thing is all the metal patches. We did so many metal patches. You can see we got these patches in, not fully finished and filled, but each of the patches in on these sides. And the biggest thing was, of course, there's already leaves and stuff in here, but we got all that floor, the cargo floor, fixed up, and a lot of the areas inside the fender all done, as well as my seatbelt, all these rusted out seatbelt areas, and and just all the areas in the floor are completely done. So I'm super happy. Basically, that means all of the metal work, with the exception of a few minor little things, all the metal work is done in this thing. So I'm super stoked that that's done before 2022. So we'll be ready to go for paint right in the spring. So anyway, check out this montage of clips. I'm just going to talk over it to explain what all happened. Enjoy. This picture here is the original rust damage right behind the driver's seat. And you can see it's extensive. It had rotted the top hat frame rail. It had rotted out the skin behind the fender, the skin behind the driver's seat, as well as the cargo floor. So this is like 4 or 5 patches, as well as that tunnel to the right there is also rotted out, and that needs to be patched. I think last year I did this. I took a piece of 16 gauge, bent it to an L shape, and that's going to be butted in, and that will repair that top hat frame rail. As you can see right there, that had already been done. Now, by the time Brian got here, that had been done, but Brian, I didn't get this film, but he also had done the skin, the 2 pieces of skin behind the fender and behind the driver's seat against that frame rail, and now we're ready for the cargo floor. So he's cutting that out and fitting that now. We're just gonna go ahead and put that repair section of cargo floor and just butt it up right against the back of the driver's seat. We're not gonna try to make it look original. I just don't care. This is gonna be a work van. But notice he is welding on the section that's butted, and the sections to the sides are flanged in. And here's the fender, and you can see that's lap welded. It's not, perfectly done, but again, this is going to be a utility vehicle. I just want it fixed and looking decent. And we have that access hole drilled in the tunnel so we can inject, any kind of fluids or oil inside of there. And here it is painted up with Port 15 and prepped. It's all looking good, good enough for a utility van. And so there's the cargo floor repaired. Next, I have an original picture of the rust behind the passenger seat. Same location, and it didn't look as bad initially, but after cutting it away and inspecting it, it's the same amount of work, right? We have to rebuild the top hat frame rail. We have to cut 2 different pieces of skin on the fender and on the driver's seat, as well as the cargo floor. As you can see, there's also some rust to the outside there, even more so than on the driver's side. So instead of doing a one piece, I did 2 pieces for the frame rail. So here's the first piece, the upright piece that's welded in. Then Brian went ahead and did the lapped piece on the fender skin there. And then instead of finishing that, we went ahead and did some more exploratory work. And you can see Brian here with the pneumatic needler. And we found a lot more rust on the passenger side on those other pieces, the outrigger and the tunnel. And so here's kind of a close-up of all that. Plus that corner there had some rot that we had to cut out. Before patching, I took the opportunity to spray some rust reformer up into those cavities and frame sections. And then Brian welded in the top of that top hat. So again, that's just 2-section. We just made it a 2-section repair. It made it a little bit easier. And then we're going to piece in that piece right there that's going to go behind the passenger seat. So that little piece right there was welded in. And then now we're ready for the cargo floor. And of course we did the same thing, butted in and then lapped it in the sides. And then we started working on the other patches like the outrigger there. And then he's fitting in that piece for the tunnel. We've got 3 different holes drilled so that we have access holes to inject liquids or oils up into there for rust prevention. And then Brian's working that corner there. That was all rotted out, and that was a difficult section as well to stitch in. And there's the look at the fender. We finally have all those patches completed there. They just need to be ground down. Okay, so next we're going to do that hole in the floor. Now this isn't a rust hole per se. This was where the sink base was. So we cut that out. Similarly, we just patched in. That's all butt welded in. A small piece of cargo floor repair section right there. So we finished pour 15ing those sections. They're ready for seam sealer. Next repair is both front seatbelt mounts on both passenger and driver side. So we had to cut those sections completely out and then prep the area around that section. And then we took 3/16 thick steel and some 16 gauge steel and the original nut inserts off the original mounts, and we cleaned those up and welded them to the 3/16 plating. And then we took that 3/16 plating with the nut insert and we just welded it. We just plug welded it onto the car, and then we also welded it underneath as well. And then we took the top skin, that 16 gauge plating, a little bit thicker, but we stitched that in to make the top skin. So these are nice and solid seatbelt mounts, both sides, ready to go. Next we tackled the nose, which used to have a stupid spare tire mount that creates not only all these extra large holes, but plenty of sheet metal rippling. So I put a 3/4 inch hole saw into my drill press, and I was able to create these dime-sized little patches. And then we widened out the holes to accommodate those dime-sized metal patches, and then we just tacked them in. It actually was a pretty quick process. The large holes are now filled, but there's still lots of body work that needs to be done to fix that damage caused by the spare tire. Next, we addressed the rusted areas on the lower front of the back fenders on both sides of the car. Although the rust holes here look small, once excavated, they were quite large, as you could see. Now, I used a little pour 15 patch and rust converter on the insides, but now I'm using a pencil to rub lead around the patch area. Once I rub that down, I'll use a piece of cardboard and I'll press it into the patch, and that will transfer a nice outline to make a template. I used that template at this point and I made the metal patch, but now I'm having to put the curve into it. Luckily, I had a cutoff of an old rounded house pillar, which I used to dolly the curve into my patch. Now, since I don't own any sheet metal tools, using that pillar with the perfect diameter worked really well. And so once it's rounded, I took it to the car and I was able to complete it by just doing some final grinding and fitting and getting that all ready for Brian to weld it in. So now Brian, as you can see here, is welding on that section. Again, we did this on both sides. And now I'm going to use this clip to transition to the next big thing that we were working on. I got my son working on this panel here, but the rest of the day we spent sanding. And we spent a lot of time prepping the outside. You can see here Brian is spot blasting, but we pretty much had 2 adults running on this car for hours, blasting and sanding the car. If you notice, there's probably 4 different colors on here. There's a light yellow, a darker yellow, there's a primer, there's bare metal, and there's rust. Rust has to go down to bare metal, and in most areas of the car, we sanded it down to at least the original lacquer, or if not, the original primer. So at this point, we're still in the middle of sanding, but once we finished sanding at this point, we tilted the bus up on its side and we power washed the entire thing since it had lots and lots of dirt and dust on it from all the sanding and work we've done. And at this point, we're drying it off with some blowers and letting it air dry. And in any of the seams, Brian's using a torch to make sure they don't flash rust. And we're finally on to here, at least, a thin coat. Again, I only had 1 quart of the SEM primer, but we're just putting a thin coat on all of the, especially the bare metal sections and all the major sections, just to seal it up from rust. Hopefully I'll be able to come back before the end of the season with some more primer and actually finish that out. But I'm not really concerned with primer. There's still a lot of body work to be done. Like I said at the beginning of the video, there's still lots of heat shrinking we need to do, some pulling of dents, and various other things. But at least we've got most everything sealed, and we were kind of under the gun at this point because, as you can see, as leaves were falling down, there was a storm coming. But we got all the primer done before the storm hit, and as you can see, it's, at least everything's at least coated a little bit. Well, that's it for this video. More restoration videos are coming, so please subscribe to follow along, and click on the playlist at the end if you'd like to catch up on previous videos. As a reminder, this tin can will be built as an electric car, so also subscribe if you want to follow along with the EV conversion. Those videos are going to be on a separate playlist for you to binge. Thanks for watching.